6 years after losing his life in a performance, a clown returns from the underworld to take revenge on those who caused his demise. Today we're going to recap the story of the movie, Stitches, from 2012. At little Tom's birthday party, his mother cuts the cake and waits for the clown to arrive. As the man is late, the woman lets everyone eat the cake and puts the knife away in the dishwasher, taking the children outside to play. Long after the scheduled time, the clown arrives in his wrecked car and almost runs over his customers, as well as offending Tom's mother. During the performance, the clown tries various cheap tricks to impress the children, but nothing seems to work. As well as Stitches being a bad clown, the little ones don't cooperate and do everything they can to make life difficult for the professional. As he tries to introduce himself, Vinny ties the clown's shoelace and Tom throws a ball in his direction, causing the man to lose his balance and fall into the kitchen. As he doesn't get up, the group approaches to see what has happened and they realize that the clown has fallen with his head on the knife they used to cut the cake, piercing his brain. Still, the clown manages to get up and removes the blade from his skull, causing a large amount of blood to spurt out onto the floor and onto Tom's face. Paralyzed with fear, the young man ends up lagging behind and is almost hit by the clown who tries to take revenge. But the already wounded man slips on his own blood and falls to the ground, dropping the knife on his skull once again. After the accident, Tom isolates himself and watches Stitch's funeral from afar. After everyone has left, the young man decides to go alone to the cemetery to pay his last respects to the clown. While looking at the tombstone, Tom hears a strange noise and notices several clowns entering a crypt. Curious, the young man follows the group and catches them making a kind of pact for the clown. Despite trying to keep quiet, Tom ends up being frightened by the ritual and is captured by the adults in costume, who warn him that a clown who doesn't finish his performance always comes back for revenge. 6 years later, Tom is still trying to come to terms with what happened and has never been to a party since the accident. Despite this, his mother will have to travel the week of his birthday and recommends that he call some friends to celebrate. Still traumatized, Tom doesn't think twice about turning down the idea and goes to school where he meets up with his childhood friends. During one of the lessons, Tom decides to talk to Vinny and asks him if he doesn't want to go home for the weekend, but the young man remembers that it's his friend's birthday and suggests they have a party. While Tom is trying to explain that he doesn't want a celebration, the teacher appears in a clown costume and says that talking is not allowed during class, ripping off Vinny's bottoms with his hands and attaching the object to a helium balloon. Despite losing a lot of blood, Vinny goes after the teacher and tries to recover the organ while the whole class laughs. Suddenly, the man says that class is over and Tom snaps out of his hallucination, discovering that it was all just an extremely bizarre nightmare. After class, Tom gets thoughtful and decides to spend some time in the old treehouse, where he used to spend his afternoons with Kate, his childhood crush. There, the young man uses a telescope to observe the cemetery and remembers the accident while looking at the coin that Stitches pulled out of his ear. After a while, Tom turns the telescope towards Kate's house and tries to observe her, but the girl closes the curtain and leaves him alone. Wanting to get back together with Kate, Tom decides he's going to get over everything and throw a birthday party, inviting his closest friends. At school, the young man hands one of the invitations to Vinny, who, thinking only of enjoying it, creates an event on my face to invite everyone at school. In the corridors, Tom is about to hand Kate an invitation when the principal appears and starts fighting with the girl about her boot, putting her in detention. After the man leaves, Tom approaches her and gives her the invitation to the party, but he is caught by the principal making jokes about the girl's detention and ends up suffering the same fate. In between classes, Tom continues to hallucinate and sees the clown everywhere, making him even more determined to get over what happened. On his way to drama class, Tom is stopped by Paul and Sarah, a couple of delinquents who always pick on him. In the hallway, the couple ask about the event's My Face page and say they're going even though they weren't invited, hitting Tom with a knee. After class, Vinny is at home looking at the people who attended the event when a gale blows his invitation out of the window, flying to the exact spot of Stitch's grave. The next morning, Tom is tidying up the house when his friends show up to help with the final preparations. After a few hours, everything is ready and the first guests begin to arrive. Before they know it, the house is packed with people, but the main guest is still beginning to rise from the grave, Stitches. Unaware of the demonic clown's return, Richie takes a tampered cookie and starts sharing it with his friends, but Tom doesn't realize that the cookie has been modified and eats it all at once. Afraid of being embarrassed because he's hallucinating, the young man goes to the bathroom to wash his face, but this doesn't solve the problem and he's left all limp when Kate arrives. While the two talk, Stitches approaches the house where he begins to observe his targets from the outside. Unaware that they are being stalked by the stalker clown, the teenagers enjoy the party and Tom tries to get close to Kate, but the girl's boyfriend shows up and ends up getting in the way. Tired of just watching, the clown approaches the entrance and walks through the young people until he reaches Tom. Seeing the clown with the knife in his hand, the young man goes into shock and starts to run, but ends up tripping and hitting his head on the ground. With Tom fallen, the clown approaches and reveals that it's really just Paul in costume. Seeing her friend in need of help, Kate approaches him and notices a nasty cut on his forehead. In a rage, Bulger says he's going to avenge his friend and calls Sarah into a fight, which makes everyone go to the kitchen to watch. Now that the way is clear, Stitches enters the house unseen and starts walking around the place looking for his first victim. In the kitchen, Bulger and Sarah begin to exchange insults until the girl begins to feel humiliated and decides to walk away. With things calmer, Kate asks for the first aid kit and Tom replies that it's in the pantry. When he learns that they have a stockpile of food at home, Bulger, who is truly starving, doesn't think twice and leaves his friend to go there and eat everything he can. Still on the kitchen floor, Tom feels ashamed of what has happened and runs to the treehouse to be alone. Right behind him, Kate also climbs the stairs and catches Tom taking some medication to calm down. Nevertheless, the girl decides to ignore it and starts talking about her childhood, when they used to climb the treehouse to watch the neighbors. Looking through the telescope, Kate realizes that the object is pointing in the direction of her bedroom and calls him insane. Realizing how angry she was, Tom explains that he was looking at the cemetery thinking about Stitches when suddenly the light in Kate's room came on. Wanting to know what was going on, the young man looked in the direction of her house and saw Kate angry after a fight with her boyfriend, leaving the bezel in place ever since. After hearing the story, the girl believes him and replies that Tom should forget what happened 6 years ago. Even though he doesn't think she'll believe him, Tom decides to tell her about the ritual he saw on the night of the funeral. Noticing the girl's interest, Tom shows her that he researched the clowns in order to understand the ritual they were performing, but that he didn't find anything very useful, except for a few texts about the singular spirit. Whenever someone becomes a clown, they have to put their makeup on an egg and keep it in a glass cylinder, preserving the uniqueness of the spirit. Despite this discovery, Tom says he hasn't been able to find anything about the origin of this tradition, nor about the link between the singular spirit and the crypt ritual. Inside the house, Paul is cramped to relieve himself and starts looking for a bathroom. As the second floor is occupied, he decides to go upstairs and passes right by Stitches without realizing it. Desperate, the young man runs to the bathroom and forgets to lock the door, wetting his clown costume while Stitches watches on. After cleaning himself up, Paul is leaving the bathroom when he hears a voice whispering his name. Following the sound, the young man ends up on the balcony where Stitches corners him. As he doesn't recognize the clown, Paul asks who he is and Stitches replies that he'll make him remember with a trick, bringing his hand close to his ear and ripping it off with brute force. Despite the pain, Paul tries to hit back with a punch and the clown grabs his fist, ripping the young man's arm off as if it were nothing. With the young man on his knees, Stitches sticks his hand inside his mouth and pulls a rabbit out of his throat, ending his show with a kick that sends Paul's head flying into a nearby lake. After making his first victim, the hooded clown pulls out the red ball on the end of his nose and orders it to sniff out the next target. Rolling through the house, the object finds Bulger in the pantry and Stitches enters the place to make his second victim. When he sees the clown, Bulger thinks it's Paul in costume and starts to offend him, but Stitches wastes no time in dealing the young man a blow by opening a hole in his skull with a corkscrew. Using an ice cream scoop, the clown begins to scoop out balls of brains and puts them all in a jar, adding a macabre syrup on top. Suddenly, Sarah enters the pantry and Stitches hides behind Bulger, holding on through the hole in his head to control the young man as if he were a puppet. After the girl leaves, Stitches feels that one more stage of his revenge has been completed and finishes cleaning himself up, walking around the house in search of his next victim. On the second floor, Vinny is playing with a friend when he bumps into Sarah, who knocks over her beer. Angrily, the girl throws the can at the young man, who hits his head on the wall. Despite this, Sarah doesn't bother to see if the young man is all right and goes to the attic to look for Paul. Looking through the telescope, Tom realizes that Stitches is in the attic and goes into shock. Frightened, Tom collects the stairs from the treehouse and tries to call Vinny to let him know, but the young man is busy and won't take his call. Just then, Sarah arrives in the attic and approaches Stitches, thinking he's Paul, but soon realizes who he really is. Frightened, the girl starts walking backwards and falls onto the bed, defenseless against the scarred clown who approaches with an umbrella. Desperate, Sarah kicks Stitches and manages to pierce his neck with the tip of her heel, but that's not enough to finish off the red-nosed zombie who removes the shoe from his skin as if it were nothing. Stitches then knocks down the girl, who tries to spit at him and run away, but the clown refuses to allow her to escape and throws the umbrella so violently that it runs through Sarah. With the blood of his third victim all over the attic, Stitches once again removes his nose and asks it to sniff out the next target. But the house cat manages to find it and starts playing with the object. Because of this, the animal ends up becoming the clown's next target. As he can't get through to Vinny, Tom climbs down from the treehouse and throws a rock through the window to get his friend's attention, but the young man is more concerned with finishing what he was doing and closes the window. Not knowing what to do, Tom goes inside the house and tries to warn Kate about Stitch's presence, but obviously the girl doesn't believe him and her boyfriend shows up to chase him away. To save as many lives as possible, Tom turns off the sound and tries to tell everyone that there's a lunatic in the house, but the young people are drunk and nobody understands what he means. Even though he was scared, Tom took a knife and went up to the second floor alone, knocking on the bedroom door to talk to Vinny. Outside, Richie is smoking when he is found by the clown's nose. As he's hallucinating, the young man doesn't think it's strange and doesn't react when Stitches grabs him from behind and cuts a hole in his stomach. Not satisfied, the clown uses Richie's organs to make a balloon dog. Desperate, the young man tries to run for help, but Stitches refuses and pierces his head with an air pump, inflating Richie's skull until it bursts like a balloon. On the second floor, Vinny opens the door and tries to get his friend to leave him alone, but Tom is insistent and the young man ends up agreeing to go to the attic to check. After seeing Sarah's body in the attic, Vinny runs back to his room and gets dressed, not realizing that Stitches is in bed. Using a spring-loaded arm, the clown manages to land a punch that knocks Vinny down, but Tom doesn't stand still and takes the opportunity to drive his knife into his back. Taking advantage of the gap, the young men throw a blanket over Stitches and join in beating up the clown, but instead of finishing the job, they just leave the zombie clown behind and run for the exit. At the door, Tom says they need to help Kate and the others and manages to convince Vinny to look for the girl. During the search, they are almost found by Stitches and have to hide to survive. When they think the clown has wandered off, the two decide to come out of the closet and search the crowd. Outside, Richie's girlfriend starts looking for the young man when she finds his body all destroyed. Frightened, the girl gives a scream that can be heard by everyone inside. Inside the house, Kate sees the clown through the window and finally realizes that Tom was telling the truth. In the middle of the confusion, Tom shows up to rescue the girl and tries to run away with her, but Stitches refuses to let this happen and uses a punch to knock the girl out. When he realizes this, Tom gives up running and goes back to save Kate, but is easily caught by the clown who sticks his head in the sink. About to drown, the young man manages to pour detergent into the clown's mouth, which releases him. Since this is totally harmless, Stitches plays with the soap bubbles and runs into Tom, who opens the fridge door, causing him to hit his head. At that moment, Kate wakes up and throws the knife towards the villain, piercing his eye once again. As the clown gets up, Tom sees the eggs that have fallen out of the fridge and remembers the singular spirit, coming up with the idea of going to the crypt to end the curse. To do so, the two get on their bikes and cycle to the cemetery while being chased by Stitches. Halfway through, the clown tries to stick the knife into Tom, who manages to dodge it, kicking him in the face instead. With that, Stitches is left behind and the youngsters manage to reach the cemetery, jumping over the wall to look for the grave. From atop the wires, the clown watches the pair approach his crypt while trying to balance himself, failing miserably and crashing to the ground. Stitches runs after the couple who are hiding behind some graves, hoping that the clown will give up looking for them. Knowing that they will soon be found, the two decide to enter the crypt anyway and rush to the entrance. After breaking the lock with a rock, Tom explains about the egg shelf and asks Kate to break it while he keeps watch, but the girl replies that it's not a good idea and asks him to go instead. Inside, Tom starts searching the shelves and finds the Stitches egg at the very top. Trying to pick it up, the young man ends up falling and knocking all the eggs off the shelf. With the curse just about to end, Tom opens the cylinder where the object is kept and finally gets the egg, but Stitches manages to capture Kate and knock the young man out before they realize it. With the two of them on top of his grave, Stitches congratulates Tom on his birthday and starts asking who to eliminate first. At that moment, Tom sees Vinny approaching from behind the clown and tries to distract him, telling him to go for it. While the clown takes a coin from his pocket, Vinny ties Stitches' shoelace and walks away, just like when he was a child. The zombie comedian then throws the coin upwards and ends up overbalancing, knocking the egg to the ground. Despite this, the object remains intact until Tom steps on the clown's head, causing him to crush his own egg with his nose. Now that the curse has been broken, Stitch's body begins to disassemble itself, leaking egg yolk until only his clothes and the shell of his face remain. 6 months later, Tom and Kate are together in the treehouse and don't notice when a clown enters the cemetery. Inside the crypt, the clown reassembles the shell of Stitch's egg, which comes back together, continuing the curse. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you like the video, like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.